I thought it would be a simple neighborly favor, Joe from next door helping me carry a few heavy boxes up my porch steps. But somewhere between the clink of old dishes and the thud of a cedar chest on the hallway floor, he told me a truth that reached straight past my good manners and into the soft place I try to keep guarded. His honesty wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was the kind that makes your hands go still and your breath get careful. I didn't expect it, and I didn't expect what it would open in me. Before I begin, would you tell me where you're watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I love picturing the neighborhoods I'm talking to. The day was sticky enough that the cardboard whispered under my palms, and my porch steps complained like old men when we set the first box down. I'm Natalie, 52, and the new owner of a house with more stories in its trim than I know what to do with. My moving truck had rumbled off an hour earlier, leaving a neat mountain of boxes and a thin string of uncertainty in my chest. I'd already moved the light things. Winter scarves, a mixing bowl chipped at the rim, a shoebox of tangled ribbons. Then Joe appeared on my path with a polite wave and the kind of careful smile that asks permission before it asks questions. Need a second set of hands, he said, thumb hooked in his pocket, green baseball cap shading his eyes. He's built like every dependable tool in a garage drawer, used, steady, not shining for show, but not going to quit on you either. I hate to impose, I answered, which was my way of saying yes without sounding like it. No imposition. Besides, I saw books, heavy, and felt personally challenged. That made me laugh. He glanced at the stacked labels in my handwriting. Kitchen, den, photos, Natalie's tools, and I noticed his gaze snag with that soft amusement men get when they see a woman's name next to a wrench. He didn't tease. He just lifted the end of the box and waited for me to take the other, a small nod asking if the pace was okay, if we should turn left or right, if he could set it down here. Everything about him asked, never assumed. In a world that moves with elbows, that felt like a fresh breeze. The hallway smelled like fresh paint and something lemony from the cleaner I'd been using. We set the box by a low bookcase I hadn't assembled yet. Each of my labels was a little island of anxiety. Where will these live? What story will they tell about me once they're unpacked? Joe didn't rifle or linger. He just wiped a streak of sweat with the back of his wrist and looked for the next load. We fell into a rhythm. One of us would call out, corner, or watch the step, and the other would adjust. The porch boards, gray as driftwood, flexed under our weight. A dragonfly stitched the air near my ferns. Somewhere a power saw complained, someone else's afternoon project, then went quiet. When Joe lifted the cedar chest I'd been pretending to forget, he grunted slightly. I heard myself say, "Only if you want to." "Wouldn't have touched it if I didn't," he said almost kindly. "But we'll do it slow, and we'll do it together." He looked me in the eye when he said together. It was such a simple word that it almost went by. We took the chest in 2 stages. To the hall, then to the bedroom where the floorboards were still learning my step. We set it down with the softest thud, and both stood with our palms resting on it, breathing like we'd earned the right to take up a small square of quiet. "You okay?" he asked. Not the casual kind of okay, but the kind that pays attention. I traced a nick on the satyr's edge. This chest's been with me since I was 20. It holds more than it has any business holding. If it's holding what I think it's holding, he said, we'll give it the respect it deserves. He said we again. I surprised myself by nodding. Back in the living room, we tackled the kitchen boxes. Plates sighed against paper. Glasses clinked like quiet applause. Joe carried with the patience of someone who's moved too many times to count. He set each box down gently, like he respected even the burden. When we took a water break, I pointed at the fridge, which I'd plugged in earlier. There's iced tea or water?" "Water's fine," he said, then glanced toward the back door. "Mind if I stand by the screen?" The breeze remembers how to be polite around 4 o'clock. I handed him a glass and watched him wait for me to pour mine first. We stood shoulder to shoulder near the door, the mesh humming with light. He didn't fill the silence with brand-new neighbor talk about property taxes or the best bakery in town. He was quiet in the way of porches and end-of-day tiredness. Only after a minute did he speak again. "That setter chest," he said. "I had one like it once." He sipped. "Well, not like it. Mine was pine. Didn't smell as fine, but it held letters. And photographs. Things I didn't always have the courage to look at." "Do you now?" I asked. He laughed softly. "Courage is a moving target." Something inside me leaned forward at that. I have spent so many years leaning back, making room, making nice, staying out of the way of trouble. My last house had a short driveway. You had to reverse carefully or you'd kiss the mailbox. My life got shaped by that habit. Careful reversals, no sudden moves. But here was Joe, not performing or pushing, just telling a small truth like it was allowed to sit in the open air. We returned to the boxes, and somewhere between pots/pans and holiday, he spoke again, voice softer than before. "I want to be transparent about something, Natalie." It startled me a little how formal that phrase sounded on a man who wore grass-stained sneakers and a paint-freckled watchband. I set the box down instead of trying to carry the moment with it. "All right," I said. "Transparent is welcome." He rubbed his palm over his forearm. "When you moved in last week, I kept to myself. Not because I didn't want to say hello. I told myself you'd be busy, and I should give you space. That's what I tell myself whenever I don't know if I'll be helpful or in the way." He drew a breath. "The truth is, I was nervous. I don't like introducing myself to new people because if they're kind to me, I'm expected to be kind back, and I worry about promising more than I can hold. I've been learning my limits. I've been learning to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong ones." It was not what I expected from a man offering to carry dishes. I felt the prick of tears change their minds and go back where they'd come from. Honesty is strange like that. It can either flood you or fix a small leak without making a scene. "Thank you for telling me," I said. We stood there in the kitchen, not quite strangers anymore, and the only loud sound was quiet relief settling in its chair. He nodded, but his jaw flexed as if there was more. "I'd also want to tell you that I'm 9 months sober." He said it as calmly as he might tell me the forecast. "I help when I can, and I leave when I should. I wanted you to know, in case I ever say, I gotta go soon if it seems neighborly. It won't be about you. It'll be about keeping my promise." There it was, the honesty I absolutely did not expect. Not from Joe, not on a humid afternoon, not with my sink still taped shut. I felt my hand go flat on the cool counter. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "I respect it. And if you ever need a reason to step away, you can always borrow a cup of sugar from me and then realize you left your oven on." That got us both smiling, the serious kind. He tilted his head. "Can I tell you one more thing? And you tell me to stop if it's too much." "Please," I said. "Consent is not just about bodies. It's about stories, too, and how we offer them." He nodded once, almost like he was saluting. "I recognized your last name on the mailbox. I used to work at a little garage down on Orchard when I was a kid. Your father hired me weekends when I was 17. I was not good with keeping my mouth shut or my hands clean." He smiled at the memory, rueful and fond. Your dad taught me more than carburetors. Taught me the kind of patience you can't fake. The week before I left for the service, he gave me a wrench, 3/8, with a nick on the handle where it fell off a lift. I've had it ever since. He reached into his pocket then, not for keys, but for a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it, and there it was, brushed steel, the handle worn smooth by someone's years. My breath did that careful thing again. You kept it. Kept it, used it, respected it. He rolled the wrench in his palm like a man who knows the weight of what he's carrying. I always thought I'd return it to him, but life... Well, you know. He looked at me then with the gentlest kind of apology. I heard he passed a while back. When I saw your name, I thought, bring it home. May I asked. That's why I brought it. He offered it and didn't look away. The metal was cooler than the air, and the nick on the handle was exactly where he said. It felt like a handshake from someone I miss more on days when things are heavy. We set another box on the counter because standing still would have tipped us into crying, and neither of us had agreed to that. When we resumed moving, something in our pace had changed. We were no longer just lifting. We were putting things to rest where they belonged. He didn't hover when I paused. I didn't rush when he did. There was a steadiness around us, a sort of neighborly gravity. In the den, sunlight made a stained glass pattern through the old window. I knelt by a box marked photos and opened the top flaps. The scent of paper, dusty, sweet, almost peppery, rose up. Joe stayed by the doorway, giving me space like a man standing at the edge of a chapel. I pulled out a photograph of my father at the garage, grease on his knuckles, a grin like mischief and daylight combined. That's him, I said, and handed it to Joe without thinking about how much that meant. He held it gently, the way he'd held the wrench, and the cedar chest, and the heavy quiet between us. He used to whistle, Joe said. 5 notes. I can't remember the tune, just that it made the mornings feel shorter. He whistled in groups of 5 because he said it matched his heartbeat when he was happy. I told him, a detail I hadn't thought of in years. It lifted in me like a boat in a tide. We moved 2 more boxes and then sat on the bottom stair, because some afternoons invent their own porch. I poured us more water, and we drank it with the exaggerated care of people who have earned their thirst. He told me about a porch swing that had hung at his old place, how it taught him patience the way a metronome teaches rhythm. I told him about my kitchen clock that runs 2 minutes fast on purpose, because I like feeling ahead of something, even if it's only an appointment. Can I be honest one last time? He asked quietly. You can. I didn't just come to help. I came because I've been telling myself to practice showing up. For a long time, I waited for life to knock right, say the right words, ask the right favor, before I'd open my door. These days I open it first and see what's there. He stared at his hands like they were a map. I figured I'd carry a box and then get out of your way. But then I saw the chest, and I saw you touch it like a prayer. And I thought, if I can be the kind of man who puts something down gently for someone who needs that, maybe I'm doing all right. It wasn't a confession looking for absolution. It was a man telling me the weather inside him. I don't know what it did to you the last time someone did that, but for me it pressed a cool cloth on an old worry. You don't have to be 20 to be brave. You don't have to be in love to be tender. You just have to decide that your honesty is not a burden, it's a bridge. Joe, I said, and my voice sounded older and steadier than the one I use at the grocery store. If you ever need someone to say easy does it, while you carry something heavy, I can do that. And if you ever need someone to tell you you've done enough for the day, I can do that too. His smile didn't show teeth, but it reached the corners of his eyes like it had a job to do. Deal, he said. We went back for the last load of the afternoon. The sun had shifted from white to gold. Cicadas wound up and unwound. On the top of a box-marked porch, the tape had lifted just a little, the way a secret lifts a corner to see if anyone's watching. I pressed it down with my thumb and felt the promise of the next hours, the kettle, the unpacking, the small ceremony of putting cups in a new cabinet. Joe hoisted the box, and I held the screen door, and we didn't have to talk to agree on who would go first. At the counter, we took a breath together, the regular kind humans take when they are making space for something good. I set 2 mugs down. The kitchen wasn't finished, and the house still sounded like a stranger when it settled, and I was barefoot because I'd lost track of my shoes. But my shoulders had dropped half an inch. The room felt more like mine for the simple reason that someone had stood in it and told me the truth. As the kettle started its soft pre-whistle, Joe nodded toward the box-marked porch again, curious but not prying. I ran my finger along the tape until it found the loose edge. "There's a little swing in here," I said. A small one. It was my mother's. She always said it makes any house honest. "Then it belongs here," he said. "We could hang it, if you want." "Not tonight. No rush. One careful hole at a time." "One careful hole at a time," I repeated, and the words fit the afternoon like a level fits a nail. We stood quietly, listening to the kettle gather its nerve. The more we didn't say, the more it felt like we were both saying yes to something we hadn't expected. Not romance, not obligation, but the clean line that runs between 2 people when they agree to meet in the open. I poured the water. He took his mug with 2 hands like it was a small animal that needed kindness. I rested the wrench on the windowsill, the nick catching the last of the day. If you've ever hauled more than boxes into a new place, if you've carried your habits and your mistakes and your good intentions up a creaky step, you know the exact ache in my forearms and the quiet relief in my chest. I didn't expect that the heaviest thing I'd put down would be a posture, the one where I do it all myself and smile about it. I didn't expect a neighbor's honesty to make the rooms feel less wide. The kettle clicked off. Outside, a pair of sparrows argued, then forgot why. Joe cleared his throat and nodded toward the back door. "Maybe tomorrow," he said. "We'll see about that swing." "Maybe tomorrow," I agreed, and then the screen caught a cooler breeze and let it in like a promise. The next morning, the air carried that crisp, late summer freshness that makes you believe even an ordinary day might hold something unexpected. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, the tile cool against my toes, and saw the wrench still resting on the windowsill where I'd left it. The nick in the handle caught the pale light, like it was winking at me, reminding me of the weight of yesterday, of Joe's quiet honesty, and the way it had settled between us without fanfare. I hadn't expected to sleep so well after a day of hauling boxes, but I did. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the relief of having someone step inside my new home and treat it, and me, with gentleness. Either way, I woke with more space in my chest than I'd felt in a long while. Around 10, a knock on the screen door startled me. Joe's cap appeared in the window, followed by his voice, calm but tentative. "Natalie, I didn't wake you, did I?" I smiled despite myself. "No, come on in." He stepped inside with a toolbox dangling from one hand. "Figured I'd keep my promise about that porch swing, only if you're up for it." I glanced at the unopened box marked porch leaning against the wall. The thought of my mother's swing finally finding its place here tugged at me like a memory begging for air. "Yes," I said softly. "Let's do it." We carried the box outside. The porch boards were still learning my step, still creaking in protest, but the air was kinder than yesterday, cooler, lighter. Joe crouched to open the box, pulling out the old swing with reverence. Its white slats were chipped in places, but still sturdy. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling the faint grooves where my mother's rings had worn into it when she used to push herself back and forth, humming her favorite hymn. Joe studied the swing and then looked up at me. "This has stories in it." "Too many to count," I admitted. She said every house needed a seat where you could let your heart catch up with your body. His face softened in a way that made me want to sit right there on the steps and talk all day. Instead, he nodded toward the beams overhead. "We'll need to drill into the joist here. Strongest point. Don't want to risk it coming loose." I fetched a step stool while he measured. His movements were precise but unhurried, the way people move when they respect what they're handling. As he marked the spot, I found myself studying the curve of his shoulders, the way he carried both caution and confidence at once. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't pretend to know everything, but knows enough to do things right. When the drill bit bit into the wood, the sound was sharp but sure. He paused halfway, glancing at me. "Still good?" "Yes," I said quickly. "Keep going." By the time the chains were secured and the swing hung steady, my palms itched with anticipation. I lowered myself onto the seat, the wood cool beneath me, the chain giving just enough to remind me this was real. The swing moved gently, like it remembered its job even after years in storage. Joe stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. "Looks right at home." "Sit with me," I said before I thought better of it. For a moment, he hesitated, then lowered himself beside me. The swing shifted under our combined weight, then steadied. We swayed together, the motion quieting the air around us. For a long while, we didn't speak. It was enough just to feel the wood beneath us, the creak of the chain, the way the porch seemed to breathe easier now that it had its anchor. Finally, Joe cleared his throat. "I was thinking about what I told you yesterday, about being 9 months sober." I turned slightly toward him, waiting. "I don't tell people that lightly," he continued. "Most of the time, I keep it tucked away. People either pity you or they wait for you to fail. But I told you because, well, I didn't want you to mistake me. I'd rather you know the truth than build the wrong picture in your head." I gripped the chain beside me, feeling its cool steadiness. "You didn't have to explain yourself to me," I said. "But you did, and that matters. I'd rather have honesty than assumptions any day." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the yard. I've spent a long time wishing someone would say that. The breeze lifted the hair at my temple, and I let the silence stretch. There are moments when words only bruise what's already tender. This wasn't one of them. This silence was a balm, a space for his honesty to rest. After a while, I spoke again. "When you told me about my father yesterday, I felt like he was standing in the room. Hearing how you remembered him, it brought him back in a way I didn't expect. You gave me something I didn't know I was missing." Joe finally turned to me, his gaze steady but unassuming. "And you gave me a place to put the truth. That's not nothing, Natalie. That's more than most people know how to do." We rocked gently, the swing keeping its own rhythm. Somewhere down the street, a lawn mower hummed, then sputtered. A dog barked twice and fell quiet. Everything around us felt ordinary, but inside, I knew something had shifted. Joe leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Can I tell you one last thing?" "Of course," I said, my voice low. "When I walked over yesterday, I thought I was just being neighborly, carrying boxes, offering a hand. But the truth is, I came because I didn't want to spend another day hiding from people. I'm learning that if I want my life to be different, I have to show up different. Helping you move, it wasn't about boxes. It was about practicing the man I want to be." I felt a lump rise in my throat, unexpected and sharp. And what kind of man is that? The kind who doesn't wait to be asked. The kind who tells the truth, even when it makes his hands shake. The kind your father would have wanted me to be. My chest tightened, not with grief, but with something gentler. A kind of permission I hadn't given myself in years, to trust, to lean, to accept. "You're already that man," I said quietly. His eyes glistened, though he blinked the shine away before it could spill. He straightened, gave the chain beside him a soft tug, and then smiled, a real smile, one that broke open the air. We sat there until the sun shifted high, painting the porch in gold. Neither of us needed to say more. The swing did the talking for us, carrying the weight of our honesty back and forth, back and forth. Later, when Joe finally stood to leave, he paused.